After my rebirth, I skipped the banquet where I was meant to drown and accepted the Duke's 3 golden invitations. Here's the thing about second chances. You don't always get them. But when I opened my eyes that morning, apricot blossoms were drifting past my window just like they had on that day 8 years ago. Or rather, the day that would be 8 years ago, if I let it happen again. A Qingdai stood by my bed, holding a pale green spring gown. She was smiling, that familiar gentle smile. "My lady, which hairpin today?" "The white jade one. I heard the Marquis of Jing'an will be at the Grand Princess's flower banquet." I stared at that white jade hairpin, and I felt the cold creep through my fingers, slow, deliberate, like lake water seeping into my lungs. In my last life, that hairpin had fallen beside the Grand Princess's lake. The shore had been packed with guests. Some noble young lord had been chasing a paper kite, and he'd crashed right through the crowd. When I bent down to pick up my hairpin, a group of young ladies shoved past me, and I went tumbling down those slippery stone steps. Water flooded my nose, my mouth. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't see. And then Sir Linchuan jumped in and pulled me out. In front of everyone. My clothes were soaked through. His arms had been wrapped around me, holding me close. And under the customs of the capital, that kind of public intimacy meant only one thing: he had to marry me. No choice. No escape. Except everyone in the city knew who he truly loved. My legitimate elder sister, Xinming Xu. They'd grown up together, childhood sweethearts, inseparable since they were small. If I hadn't fallen into that lake, he would have asked the Grand Princess to be their matchmaker that very night. He would have proposed to the Xin family properly. Instead, he got me. And for 8 years, he never forgave me for it. I poured everything I had into that marriage. The shops my birth mother left me, I sold them to fill the holes in the Marquis estate's finances. I nursed his gravely ill grandmother. I managed every social obligation, repaired every mistake made beneath that grand, crumbling roof. When the estate prospered, everyone praised his ancestors and his ability. When anything went wrong, he'd look at me with those cold eyes and ask why I couldn't even handle such a small thing. In the year my illness became incurable, he finally sat beside my bed. After 8 years as husband and wife, I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd offer me one kind word. Instead, he stared out the window and said quietly, "Shanzai, if I could live it all again, I would rather I had never saved you that day." I didn't even have the strength to cry anymore. I just asked, what if the one who'd fallen into the lake was my sister? He was silent for a long time, and I never heard his answer. I died without a. And now I was back. The very morning of that flower banquet. Qingdai was still waiting for me to choose my jewelry. The white jade hairpin sat in her palm like an accusation. I took it from her, walked to my dressing box, and placed it in the deepest compartment where I wouldn't have to see it. "I'm not going today," I said. Qingdai froze. "But my lady, you've been looking forward to this banquet for so long. Why would you suddenly stay home? In my last life, I had looked forward to it. I'd known Sir Linchuan would attend, and I'd prepared a new dress just for the chance to see him from across the garden. I'd been young and foolish, full of that tender girlhood hope. But I'd never intended to steal my sister's marriage. I never wanted that. 8 years of his coldness had worn that fragile affection down to nothing. "Bring me a basin of cold water," I said. Qingdai's eyes went wide. "What do you need cold water for?" I didn't answer. When she brought it, I poured it over my own head. The shock made my whole body shake. I sat beside the open window in my wet clothes for half an hour, until I'd sneezed several times in a row. Only then did I change into dry garments and lie down. Qingdai was nearly in tears. "My lady, you're abusing your own body. A few days of fever are better than sacrificing an entire lifetime," I told her. The physician arrived quickly. He took my pulse and declared I'd caught a chill. Must remain in bed, mustn't leave the house, mustn't expose myself to wind. My father's principal wife, Madame Ju, stood at the doorway like she was afraid the illness might jump out and touch her. "Why did you have to fall ill today of all days?" I coughed weakly. "I find it unfortunate as well, mother." She didn't notice anything unusual. After warning me not to wander about, she left for the banquet with Xinming Xu. Before she departed, my sister came to my bedside. She wore a crabapple red spring dress that made her striking features glow even brighter. "Rest well, sister," she said. "I'll look at all the newest fashions for you and sketch them when I return." She'd always been like this. Give me jewelry she no longer liked. Say a few kind words on my behalf before father. Take whatever I loved most, as though it naturally belonged to her. She wasn't deliberately cruel, I don't think. She'd simply never considered my wishes important. I looked at her and offered one warning. Don't linger beside the lake today. There will be many guests, and the stone steps are slippery. She blinked, then laughed. Has the fever confused you? There's a railing around the Grand Princess's Lake. I said nothing more. I only knew that I wouldn't walk to that lakeside again. What happened next? Well, that was out of my hands. That afternoon, hurried footsteps sounded outside my courtyard. One of Madame Ju's senior maids pushed open the door, barely able to hide her delight. Second young lady. The eldest young lady fell into the lake at the Grand Princess's residence. Qingdai's medicine bowl shook in her hands. I raised my head sharply. What happened? The young prince was chasing a kite and scattered the crowd. The eldest young lady was pushed down the stone steps. Fortunately, the Marquis of Jingen had been nearby the whole time. He jumped in immediately and rescued her. The maid grew more pleased with every word. Before the Grand Princess and all the noble ladies, the Marquis declared he would take responsibility. He's sending a matchmaker tomorrow. The eldest young lady and the Marquis have always loved each other. This truly is a blessing born from misfortune. For a moment, I could only stare. The accident from my last life hadn't disappeared. Only the woman who fell had changed. But something else was strange. Why had Sir Linchuan been nearby the whole time in my previous life? He'd been speaking with someone in the distance. He'd only rushed over after he heard the screams. This time, it was almost as though he'd known something would happen beside that lake. A thought flickered across my mind, but I couldn't quite grasp it yet. After the maid left, Qingdai studied me cautiously. My lady, are you not upset? Why should I be? The Marquis used to. Whatever he used to be has nothing to do with me. I lifted the remaining half bowl of medicine and drank it in one swallow. It was bitter, but not nearly as bitter as my previous life. By evening, the entire Shan household was celebrating the coming marriage alliance with the Marquis of Jingen. Then, just before nightfall, a gatekeeper hurried in with an invitation. Its cover was pressed with red gold patterns. The crest of the Duke of Jangwa's residence was stamped in the lower corner. Qingdai's hands trembled as she carried it to me. My lady, the Duke of Jangwa has sent a golden invitation. I broke the seal. It contained neither a marriage proposal nor an invitation to a banquet. There was only one line, written in strong, elegant characters. Last year at the Anji Temple charity sale, second young lady Shan offered valuable guidance regarding the accounts. 3 of my enterprises are now in difficulty. I sincerely ask for your counsel. The signature beneath it held 3 characters. Pei Yongju. As I stared at the words, I finally remembered something I'd overlooked in my previous life. Last winter, old Madame Pei had organized a charity sale at Anji Temple for the widows and families of soldiers killed in battle. The manager had fallen ill without warning, leaving the ledgers in chaos. I'd accompanied Madame Ju to burn incense, and almost without thinking, I'd reorganized the records of donations, goods, wages, and expenses. I'd also suggested that distributing rice every month would only keep the soldiers' families alive. If the Duke's residents truly wanted to help them long-term, they should allow them to earn a share of the profits through their own craft work. The temple had been crowded that day. I finished the accounts and left without ever meeting Pei Yongju in my previous life. It wasn't until 4 years later that I learned he'd already heard my name. But by then I was the Marchioness of Jingen, married, untouchable, and he never crossed the proper boundary. So he hadn't appeared from nowhere in this life. I simply hadn't married into the Marquis estate. And a door that had once remained closed had opened early. I folded the invitation again. The road from my previous life had been shut by my own hand. This new door was only beginning to open. Early the next morning, Madame Ju arrived at my courtyard with 2 senior maids. Her gaze kept drifting toward the golden invitation. Why would the Duke send a letter to you? He wrote that he'd seen the accounts I reorganized at last year's charity sale. He wants me to examine 3 of his enterprises.
Madame är ju Feigned.
The residence of a mighty duke needs a young girl to keep its accounts. Shinming Shu sat nearby. She still looked pale from her fall, but sweetness shone unmistakably in her eyes. Mother, perhaps the duke truly believes sister is capable. Madame Ju remained unconvinced. She'd never allowed me to touch the Shan family's real ledgers. Only when festivals made the household too busy would she ask me to organize gift lists or check the storerooms. Once the work was done, the credit still went to Shinming Shu. It was hardly surprising she didn't believe in me. Father, however, took the invitation very seriously. After the midday meal, he summoned me to the front hall. The Duke of Jiangua is nearly 30 and has yet to marry. This invitation may not be solely about business. I listened in silence. He stroked his beard. If he truly has an interest in you, you must know how to conduct yourself. You may be a concubine-born daughter, but marrying into a ducal household would still be a great fortune granted to you by the Shan family. In my previous life, sentence by sentence, they'd used that same phrase, a fortune granted by the Shan family. Until I'd lived like an object rather than a person, I asked mildly, and if the Duke has no intention of proposing, Father's smile faded. Then find a way to give him one. I lowered my eyes and gave no answer. 3 days later, when my cold had begun to ease, I rode to the Duke of Jiangua's residence. Pei Yongju received me in his outer study. He wore a dark blue-green robe, was tall with calm features and a composed gaze. 3 stacks of ledgers had already been arranged on the desk. Beside them lay the old accounts from last year's charity sale at Anji Temple. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. Does Miss Shan remember this ledger? I do. At the time, you said relief could only save people for a season. If they were to survive in the long term, they needed a way to earn money with their own hands. It was only a passing suggestion. I remembered it for a long time. He pushed the first ledger toward me. The Cloud Briade Shop, Angie Apothecary, and 4 Seasons Workshop. How many days will you need? I turned 2 pages. The Cloud Briade Shop's accounts aren't disordered. The problem is the merchandise. I don't need several days. He looked up. You can already see the problem. For the past 3 years, the shop has continued producing scrolling peonies and round floral medallions, patterns that were fashionable 10 years ago. The materials are excellent, but the prices have no clear levels. Ordinary wealthy families can't afford them, while young ladies from great houses find the designs old-fashioned. The stock filling your storeroom isn't poor merchandise. It's excellent merchandise no one wants. I opened the Angie Apothecary inventory ledger. Next, the apothecary purchases. Too much stock. Summer remedies for heat remain in the storeroom through winter. The numbers show no loss yet, but all the silver is trapped in unsold goods. Once the herbs grow damp or insects reach them, the loss becomes real. And 4 Seasons Workshop at present, it's not a business. It's relief. I raised my eyes to meet his. The Duke's residence sends silver every month. The soldiers' widows receive rice by the day. Regardless of how much they produce, they can remain alive, but they'll never learn to stand securely on their own. The study fell silent. Pei Yongju asked, what would you do? Divide the Cloud Briade shop into 2 lines. One should retain costly fabrics and traditional designs for noble families. The other should sell moderately priced ready-made garments, shawls, and accessories that daughters of prosperous merchants can afford. The Angie Apothecary should purchase smaller quantities according to the season. Common herbs can be combined into clearly priced packets for colds, summer heat, and sleeplessness, with simple instructions for their use. 4 Seasons Workshop should pay by the finished piece. Its goods can be sold on consignment through the Briade shop. The more the goods earn, the more the women who made them should receive pay. Yongju didn't agree at once. Instead, he asked, what do you require? The authority to choose and dismiss the people working under me. In my previous life, Sir Lin Chuan had claimed he was placing the Marquis Estate's businesses in my hands. Yet he wouldn't allow me to dismiss the old managers, nor would he let me change any inherited rule. He'd wanted someone to clean up his disasters. He'd never wanted someone with the power to make decisions. Pei Yongju asked, What else? 3 months. If the three enterprises show no improvement, I'll take no payment. If they make a profit, I want 10%. The manager outside the door drew a sharp breath. Pei Yongju merely removed the small seal hanging from his waist and placed it on the desk. With this seal, you may transfer the staff and goods of all three enterprises. I didn't immediately take it. Your Grace isn't afraid I'll leave the shops in a worse condition? I am, he said. His answer was immediate. Then why give me such authority? Because if I ask you to produce results, I can't bind your hands at the same time. The words were quiet, yet they held me motionless for a heartbeat. At last, I took the seal. The jade was cool in my palm. Across 2 lifetimes, it was the first time I'd truly held the power to decide what happened next. Sir Linchuan's betrothal gifts arrived at the Shan residence half a month later. 88 carrying chests stretched from the mouth of the street to the end of the lane. To an onlooker, the display appeared magnificent. I saw the truth at once. Nearly half the objects had come from the Marquis estate's old storerooms. Several sets of gold and silver vessels were in outdated styles. The corners of the chests were worn. Even the silk wasn't from the current season. I'd learned after marrying into the family in my previous life. The Marquis of Jing'an's estate possessed little beyond its noble facade. In truth, its expenses had exceeded its income for years. Sir Linchuan's father had loved grandeur and left behind considerable debt. Sir Linchuan inherited the title while still young. He knew nothing about household finance. He only knew that throughout his childhood, the estate had never appeared to lack silver. In my previous life, I'd used my dowry to revive the family farms and converted a failing restaurant into a freight depot. Only then had I managed to preserve the estate's appearance of wealth. This time, I wouldn't marry him. Naturally, the holes in his finances hadn't vanished. Madame Ju saw only the 88 chests. When she uncovered a set of gem-laid red gold hair ornaments, she frowned. This is much too old. If Ming-Shu wears it at her wedding, people will laugh. Shin Ming-Shu looked disappointed as well. Mother, perhaps we should have a new set made. Madame Ju's gaze quickly settled on me. The red gold filigree phoenix set your mother left you is exquisitely made. Your sister is getting married. Bring it out as part of your wedding gift to her. She'd said exactly the same thing in my previous life. My birth mother had placed that set in my hands while gravely ill and told me it was part of my dowry. But in my previous life, I hadn't dared refuse. Shin Ming-Shu wore it on her wedding day, and everyone praised the Shan family's devotion to its legitimate daughter. When my own wedding came, I wore nothing more than an ordinary set of pearls. Now Madame Ju made the same demand again. I answered calmly. That belongs to my dowry. Her expression darkened. Your elder sister is marrying. Is it not proper for a younger sister to give her a set of ornaments? I can give her a wedding gift. There's a pair of white jade rouet in the storeroom that I received for my birthday last year. If sister likes them, she may have them. But the phoenix ornaments my late mother left me are not available. Embarrassment flickered across Shin Ming-Shu's face. Sister, I don't absolutely need them. Mother only mentioned it in passing. Why must you be so calculating? I'd heard that sentence too many times in my previous life. When she wanted my courtyard, she said she'd only stay there temporarily. When she took my chain, she said sisters shouldn't keep account of such things. She never believed she was stealing from me. In her heart, the finest things naturally belonged to her first. I set down my teacup. Since sister doesn't truly need them, there's even less reason to take them. Madame Ju slammed her palm onto the table. Now that you've attached yourself to the Duke of Jiangguo residence, you dare disregard your own family. I'd already ordered Qing Dai to bring my mother's dowry register. The phoenix set is recorded here. It's private property left to me by my late mother. If mother believes the private property of a concubine-born daughter may be moved at will, then let us invite father and the clan elders to examine the Shan family's rules together. Madame Ju's face changed immediately. The Shan family valued its reputation above all else. If word spread that the principal wife had seized the belongings of a dead concubine to decorate her own daughter's wedding, no one would praise her maternal affection. They'd call her cruel to the concubine-born daughter in her care. At that moment, Father entered from outside. He caught the last part of the argument and frowned. "What is all this noise?" Madame Ju changed her tone at once. "I merely asked Z to give Mingshu a set of ornaments for her wedding. The child cannot bear to part with them." I handed father the dowry register. "Your daughter is not unwilling to give sister a wedding gift. But sister is marrying into a marquis household. The Marquis of Jingant's estate should be the one to provide her with suitable dignity. If even the jewelry left by her younger sister's dead mother must be borrowed to maintain appearances, outsiders may misunderstand and think the marriage is not as splendid as it seems." Father's gaze moved to the old betrothal gifts. His brow tightened almost imperceptibly. After a moment, he said coldly, "Since the ornaments were left by your mother, keep them properly. Mingshu's wedding gifts will be paid for from the common household funds." I closed the register. I didn't feel the rush of triumph I'd once imagined. I felt only calm. Refusing someone didn't cause the heavens to fall. A few days later, Sir Lin Chuan personally came to deliver the marriage contract. I was returning from the accounting room when I met him beneath the covered corridor. He looked exactly as I remembered. Handsome features, a moon-white robe, the effortless bearing of a young nobleman. But the instant he saw me, he stopped. That wasn't the gaze of a man seeing me for the first time. In that moment, I understood why he'd waited beside the lake before the accident. He'd returned as well. Sir Lin Chuan stared at me, complicated emotions passing through his eyes. "You've recovered. Thank you for your concern, my lord." "I have." He was silent for a moment. "Mingshu and I will marry next month." His tone sounded partly like an announcement, partly like a test, and I gave him a proper bow. "Congratulations, my lord. You've finally obtained what you wished for." Something shifted between his brows. "Why did you not attend the flower banquet?" I caught a chill. Naturally, I couldn't go. He studied me for a long time, perhaps wondering whether I also remembered our previous life. I offered him no answer. If there's nothing else, I must inspect the Cloud Briade shop's new stock. I turned to leave, but he suddenly called after me. "Shanzai." I looked back. He seemed about to say something more. But in the end, he only said, "You will live well in this life, too." Even now, there was a trace of condescension in his comfort, as though my future happiness was something he might generously permit. I smiled. Naturally. From that moment onward, whether I lived well or badly had nothing to do with him. After taking charge of the 3 enterprises, I went out almost every day. Madame Ju considered it disgraceful for an unmarried young woman to appear so frequently in public and tried several times to stop me. But the Duke's residence always sent a dignified senior maid and 2 guards to accompany me. Even those eager to gossip could find no proper excuse. Manager Du had worked at the Cloud Briade shop for more than 20 years. When I first proposed changing the designs, his face filled with resistance. "Miss Shan, the Cloud Briade shop has always served noble families. If we begin selling inexpensive ready-made clothing, will we not lower our own standing? The shop hasn't made a profit in 3 months. The market is poor this year. It was poor last year as well." I placed the inventory list in front of him. "These cloaks and padded dresses are worth nearly 3,000 taels in total. If they remain another year, they'll be useful only as old fabric to be taken apart." He protested. "But they're all excellent goods." "Excellent goods are not the same as goods customers are willing to buy." I didn't dismiss him. Manager Du understood fabric and knew the shop's old customers. He possessed genuine skill. He'd simply guarded the glory of the past for too long. I divided the Cloud Briade shop into 2 sections. The front continued selling rare fabrics and custom-made gowns. The rear was repainted and filled with shawls, embroidered sachets, and shoe uppers from 4 Seasons Workshop. The younger embroiderers no longer produced only peonies and auspicious clouds. They stitched camellias, magnolia, and fish beneath lotus leaves. The colors became fresher and lighter. I didn't wait for luck to bring customers through the door. The Grand Princess happened to be holding a spring charity sale for soldiers' families. I offered 30 sample pieces and arranged for the embroiderers themselves to explain the story behind each one. Old Madame Pei also agreed to wear a magnolia shawl made by 4 Seasons Workshop on the day of the sale. Even so, the first collection failed. I'd assumed young women would favor light fabric and bright colors, so I'd ordered a series of pale spring gowns. Many guests asked about them at the charity sale. Very few bought them. A wealthy merchant's wife told me directly, "The colors are lovely, but the sleeves are too wide. My daughters must keep household accounts and hold their children. These would be inconvenient." Another young woman found the price too high. When I returned, I recalculated the accounts and discovered that I'd focused on appearance while ignoring practicality and labor. The embroiderers at Four Seasons Workshop were highly skilled, but they covered every garment with dense stitching. The cost couldn't possibly come down. That night, I sat in the rear courtyard of the Briade shop and read through the accounts for the first collection 3 times. Manager Du stood in the doorway. He didn't gloat. He only asked, "What does Miss Shawn intend to do?" I closed the ledger. "Admit that my judgment was wrong."
He blinked.
Where was it wrong? I considered whether young women would enjoy looking at the gowns. I didn't consider what they needed to do while wearing them. I also overestimated how much customers would pay for a new design. The next day, I brought the embroiderers and several regular customers together and asked them to explain every inconvenience face to face. We narrowed the sleeves and reduced the heavy embroidery. Expensive silk thread was used only at the collar and hem. We separated the garments into everyday and banquet wear, with the prices clearly marked. Half a month later, the second collection went on sale. Princess Aping selected a magnolia shawl at the charity sale, not because she happened to take shelter from the rain near our stall, but because the embroiderer told her that the shawl had been made by the widow of a wounded soldier. The princess bought it immediately and ordered 2 spring gowns as well. After she wore them to a tea gathering, the Cloud Briade shop finally began to attract attention. At the end of the first month, the profit was modest, but it was enough to prove that the direction could work. Four Seasons Workshop distributed payment by the piece. For the first time, one soldier's widow stared at the silver in her palms until her eyes reddened. The Duke's residence used to give us rice every month. "I knew it was charity," she said, "but this silver, I earned it myself." Her words left me silent for a long time. In my previous life, I too had believed that if someone was willing to give me a place, I should be grateful. But there is a difference between being kept alive by another person's mercy and standing firmly on one's own feet as promised. Pei Yongju gave me 10% of the profit. He also included a formal deed. It stated clearly that all dividends earned by Shanzai were her private property, unrelated to the Shawn family, and that no other person could withdraw them on her behalf. I looked up at him. "Was this your Grace's idea? Someone from the Shawn family recently questioned the accounting office about the amount of your dividends." My fingers tightened around the deed. That certainly sounded like father. "Your Grace need not offend the Shawn family on my behalf." "I'm not offending them on your behalf." His voice was quiet. "You earned this through your own ability. The Duke's residence is therefore responsible for placing it in your hands according to our agreement." After speaking, he pushed the small seal back toward me. "The 3 months aren't over yet." I reminded him, "There's no need to wait. What if I truly ruin the shops later?" Pei Yongju looked at me. "If you fulfill your duty and the business still suffers a loss, then the loss is a risk of commerce. It's not a crime that belongs to you alone." Those words reassured me more than any promise that everything would always be my fault to bear, or that he would blindly defend me no matter what. He didn't deny that failure was possible. He simply understood that one person's failure shouldn't be made to carry the weight of everyone else's choices. On Xinming Shu's wedding day, her dowry procession stretched for miles. The entire capital spoke with envy. I wore a pearl hairpin I'd chosen for myself and stood at the entrance of the Shawn residence to see her into the bridal sedan. She took my hand and said quietly, "Sister, I know you once liked Lin Chuan too." I didn't deny it. There was no shame in a young girl feeling a little admiration for a handsome young man. As she continued, "Now he and I are finally married, and you've gained the Duke of Janggua's appreciation. From now on, both of us will live well." I straightened the edge of her red veil. "Sister, may you receive everything you wished for." There was no mockery in the words. She truly had obtained what she wanted. Whether she could live well with it, that would depend on her. Less than a month after the wedding, Madame Ju began sending tonics and fabric to the Marquis estate. Soon afterward, she began sending banknotes as well. Half a month later, Shinming Shu returned to her maternal home in person. Her clothes and jewelry remained luxurious, but exhaustion had settled between her brows. The old madam summons me before dawn every day to attend her sick bed. The porridge can't be too hot or too cold. When Lin Chuan returns to our room, he asks why the invitations for the spring banquet aren't finished. Madame Ju advised her, "Your mother-in-law is seriously ill. A daughter-in-law is expected to care for her. But the estate managers don't listen to me either. I wanted to replace a set of curtains, and the accounting office claimed there was no silver. How can a marquis household fail to produce a few hundred taels?" I continued eating without interrupting. She suddenly turned to me. "Sister, you understand accounts and know how to manage servants. Could you come to the Marquis estate and take a look for me?" Madame Ju immediately added. "She only wants you to look. No one is asking you to provide money." I set down my chopsticks.
No.
Shinming Shu stared. "Why not? An outsider shouldn't interfere with the private accounts of the Marquis estate. You're my sister. How are you an outsider? It's precisely because I am your sister that I cannot perform the duties of the Marchioness of Jingen for you." Her eyes reddened. "You know I was never taught these things." "Neither was I. You and I are different." The words escaped her before she could stop them. The room fell silent. She seemed to realize what she'd said. Embarrassment crossed her face. Yes, she and I were different. She was the legitimate daughter. From childhood, she needed only to study music, painting, poetry, and the art of social gatherings. I was concubine-born. I had to learn calculation, household work, and how to read every expression around me, merely to live securely in the Shan residence. She'd never envied my abilities. Now that she needed them, she believed I ought to clean up her difficulties for her. "You can learn," I said, looking directly at her. "First, determine the estate's fixed monthly income. Then separate the expenses that cannot be reduced from those that can. If the managers refuse to obey you, learn whose protection they rely upon. If the old madam requires attendance, arrange shifts with the senior maids." She frowned. "You make it sound easy. It's not easy. In my previous life, I'd spent 8 years holding that estate together. Every tale of silver, every banquet, every social obligation had required time and thought. Sir Lin Chuan had always believed it was nothing more than a wife's duty. Now Shinming Shu believed the same. She thought I'd done it well, because the work itself must have been simple. Sister, no account book improves by itself. No life can be managed without effort." She didn't take the words to heart. When she left that day, she still carried 300 taels in banknotes from Madame Ju. I didn't stop her. This was the life she'd chosen. As my reputation spread, the number of families proposing marriage to me suddenly increased. Some genuinely valued my ability. Others merely wanted to use me to establish a connection with the Duke of Jianghua's residence. After examining them all, father favored a salt merchant surnamed Gu. The Gu family possessed great wealth, but no official rank. Master Gu was nearly 40. His first wife had died, leaving 2 sons and a daughter. He offered 12,000 taels in betrothal gifts, on the condition that I manage his businesses after marriage. Madame Ju placed his portrait before me, speaking with unusual gentleness. "Master Gu may be somewhat older, but his fortune is vast. You would enter the household as his lawful wife. His children are already grown, so you wouldn't even need to trouble yourself with childbirth." I studied the plump face in the portrait. "Why does he wish to marry me?" "Naturally, he's heard of your skill in business. If he requires someone to manage his enterprises, why not hire a manager? Why must he marry one?" Madame Ju frowned. "A woman cannot spend her entire life conducting business outside. You must marry eventually." The Gu family's willingness to offer so much silver proves their sincerity. Father also considered the match ideal. After marrying into the Gu family, you may continue doing business, while opening the Shan family's path into the salt trade. 2 gains from 1 marriage. I refused outright. Father's face darkened. "Marriage is a matter decided by parents. It is not yours to choose. If father forces me, I will spread the truth that the Gu family is spending 12,000 taels to purchase a Shan daughter as their household accountant. His palm struck the table. Insolent girl. I didn't retreat. Many people in the capital now know that I work for the Duke's residence. The Gu family approaches at this moment because everyone understands what they want. If father believes the transaction honorable, why fear that others will hear of it? We parted on bitter terms that day. Father confiscated the token that allowed me to leave the residence and stationed senior maids outside my courtyard. But this time, I wasn't unprepared. When I'd received my first share of the profits, I'd already asked Qingdai to investigate the 2 shops and farmland my birth mother had left me. The Shan family had managed them for years, yet most of their income had flowed into the common household accounts. I'd also asked an elderly clansman who'd been close to my mother to examine the dowry register and stamp a duplicate copy. If father truly accepted the Gu family's betrothal gifts, I would take the accounts before the clan and demand that my late mother's property be settled first. Old Madame Pei had stated clearly that if the Shan family forced me into marriage, I could stay temporarily at a country estate in her name until the clan reached a decision. I'd already rented a small courtyard of my own and saved enough money to support myself for a year. Leaving the Shan family wouldn't be easy. But marriage was no longer my only path out. Qingdai was still frightened. My lady, what if master truly locks you inside? Then I'll create a scandal in the one place he fears most. Father had never been most afraid that I would suffer. He was afraid the Shan family's reputation would suffer. The next afternoon, a disturbance rose outside my courtyard. Pei Yongju, the Duke of Jianghua, had come to the Shan residence in person. Father didn't dare stop him. When I entered the front hall, a golden invitation embroidered with twin lotus flowers lay before the Duke. He didn't immediately hand it to me. Lord Shan wishes to marry you to the Gu family. Your Grace receives news quickly. Yesterday, the Gu family began asking whether, after marrying you, they would be permitted to continue working with the Duke's residence. I wasn't surprised. So your Grace has come to end our cooperation? No.
He looked at me.
I came to ask whether you wish to marry, or whether you merely wish to leave the Shan family.
The question startled me.
Father and Madame Ju had asked only whether I would marry Master Gu. The Gu family cared only whether I could manage their fortune. No one had ever begun by asking what I wanted. After a moment, I said, I've already prepared to leave the Shan family. Even if I never marry, I can live. A faint flicker of surprise passed through Pei Yongju's eyes. Then he seemed to release a quiet breath. Good. Your Grace doesn't intend to persuade me. To accept your help only, when you possess a way out can you make a genuine choice. He pushed the golden invitation toward me. That is why I have not come to save you today. I have come only to ask you to marry me. I didn't reach for it. Why me? At first, I truly valued only your ability. His honesty was almost ruthless. The Duke's residence owns many enterprises. My grandmother is growing old, and I often spend long periods away. You know how to manage affairs, and you understand boundaries. How is that different from the Gu family? Pei Yongju didn't avoid the question. If that were all, there would be no difference.
He paused.
Therefore, I can hire another chief steward. If you marry into my household, you may continue managing the 3 enterprises if you wish. If you don't wish to manage the inner household, you need not accept it. Every task you undertake will continue to earn the agreed share of profit. Becoming my wife will not turn your labor into an obligation without value. I watched him. What else? I saw how you treated the women of Four Seasons Workshop. I also saw that when your first collection failed, you didn't blame the manager or the embroiderers. His voice was low and steady. The way a person uses power is more trustworthy than anything she says about herself. He opened the golden invitation. Inside was not an ordinary marriage letter, but a list of conditions written in his own hand. My dowry, property, and earnings would remain mine alone. I would be free to enter and leave the commercial houses. The Duke's residence could not seize or use my private property by force. If I managed its enterprises, I would continue receiving the previously agreed share of profits. After 3 years, if I requested an amicable divorce, Pei Yongju would not prevent me. Every condition was written clearly. Your Grace isn't afraid people will say you married a woman who knows only how to negotiate terms. He looked at me. I fear marrying a woman who says nothing, then fills with resentment until there's nothing left of her. The words pricked a place deep within my memory. In my previous life, I'd never negotiated conditions with Sir Lin Chuan. I'd believe husband and wife shouldn't calculate too precisely. Step by step, I'd surrendered everything I had to give. In the end, I truly had been full of resentment, not because he didn't love me, but because I'd never once fought for myself. And if I refuse, I asked, our business arrangement will continue unchanged. My grandmother's country estate will remain available to you until you find another residence. Marriage and business should not be tied together. I studied him for a long time, then I lifted the brush and wrote my name at the bottom of the golden invitation. I wasn't grasping at him because I had nowhere else to go. I'd already prepared my own retreat. And even with another road available, I still chose this marriage. Pei Yongju's gaze rested on the 3 characters of my name for a long time. As I left the hall, he suddenly called to me. Shanzai. It was the first time he'd spoken my name directly. I turned. I cannot promise that I will never make a mistake, he said, standing in the slanting afternoon light, his expression restrained. But I can promise that when I do, I will not place the entire price of it upon you. The second golden invitation wasn't a rope thrown to a drowning woman. It was a man I chose with my own hand, after I already knew how to reach the shore. The capital erupted when news spread that the Duke of Jianghua had proposed to the Shan family's concubine-born daughter. Only the previous day, Madame Zhu had accused me of being ungrateful and difficult. The moment she learned that Pei Yongju had come in person to request my hand, her attitude changed completely. She busied herself preparing my dowry and told everyone who visited that the Shan family had raised its daughters exceptionally well. The father was even more delighted. After you marry into the Duke's residence, remember that the Shan family is your root. When your younger brother enters official service, he will still depend upon the Duke's support. I didn't argue. I merely checked my dowry register again. The shops, farmland, and jewelry left by my birth mother were listed separately and in full. The common household provided little, and I didn't fight for more. The wedding was set for 2 months later. Pei Yongju didn't arrange an extravagance, but every matter was handled properly. Senior maids from the Duke's residence came to ask what patterns I liked, which dishes I preferred for the banquet, and whether I wished flowers planted outside the bridal chamber. No one had asked me such questions when I married into the Marquis estate in my previous life. Old Madame Cyr had chosen my wedding robes. The feast followed the estate's inherited customs. Even the bridal room preserved the furnishings Sir Lin Chuan had favored as a boy. I'd been like an object carried into someone else's house, expected to adapt silently to whatever already existed. Now, every small choice felt strange. On my wedding day, I wore the red gold filigree phoenix ornaments my mother had left me. The woman reflected in the bronze mirror looked calm. She didn't possess the fear I'd carried into the bridal sedan in my previous life. As Qingdai adjusted my skirt, her eyes reddened. My lady, you can finally leave the Shan family. I took her hand. I'm not escaping. I'd chosen a road for myself. When the bridal sedan entered the Duke of Jianghua's residence, old Madame Pei waited in the main hall in person. She looked stern, but when I served her tea, she placed a jade bracelet around my wrist with her own hands. Yongju is quiet and doesn't know how to say pleasing things. If he treats you poorly, come and tell me directly. Pei Yongju stood beside us. Grandmother, there's no need to undermine me before the guests. Laughter filled the hall. Old Madame Pei laughed as well. If you fear being undermined, then treat your wife properly. The wedding didn't stir the entire capital as Xinming Shu's had. Yet for the first time, I understood that marriage didn't have to mean handing a woman over from one household to another. It could also be 2 people standing before witnesses and solemnly affirming a choice they'd both made. Late that night, only Pei Yongju and I remained in the bridal chamber. I drew a copied agreement from my sleeve. After reading it, he brought out his private seal and stamped the end. Who will keep it, he asked. There are 2 copies. We each keep one. He nodded. As it should be. A cushioned couch had already been prepared in the outer room, I asked. Your Grace intends to sleep outside. Yes. You could return to your own courtyard.
He stopped.
If the husband leaves the bridal chamber on the wedding night, the entire residence will decide by morning that his wife has lost favor. I don't mind.
Ido.
He turned back to me. Now that you've entered this household, you shouldn't be treated with contempt. Sir Linchuan had also slept in the outer room on our wedding night. By the next morning, everyone in the Marquis estate knew the groom hadn't touched me. The senior maids looked at me with pity mixed with disdain. It took me 2 years to make the household truly regard me as the Marchioness. Pei Yongju also refused to cross my boundaries. But before anything else, he protected my dignity. After he lay down, the room grew quiet. Sometime later, his voice came from the outer chamber. You cannot sleep. I'm not accustomed to this. Is the bed too hard? No. The pillow? I couldn't help asking. Does your Grace usually ask this many questions? Silence held for a moment.
No.
Then why tonight? It's my first time taking a wife. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I froze, then laughed aloud. The Duke of Zhenghua, whom outsiders considered cold and unapproachable, had admitted without embarrassment that he didn't know. It's also my first time marrying your Grace. The marriage from my previous life didn't count. Pei Yongju's voice softened. Then we'll learn slowly. We didn't share a bed that night. Yet across both my lives, it was the first wedding night on which I slept in peace. On the 5th day after the wedding, old Madame Pei summoned me to the main courtyard. The ledgers for the Duke's inner household and the keys to the storerooms had been placed on the table. I'm old. I no longer possess the energy I once did. Since you've married into the family, these matters will come to you sooner or later. I didn't immediately accept them. In my previous life, old Madame Cyr had placed every household account in my hands on the 3rd day after my wedding, claiming she trusted my ability. Only later did I understand she'd merely wanted someone else to carry a crushing burden. Grandmother, allow me to study the household for 3 months first, I said, meeting old Madame Pei's eyes. After 3 months, if I am willing to take responsibility, we can establish the rules. If I do not accept, the residents must still hire another chief steward. She looked surprised, though not angry. Must members of one family divide things so clearly? It is precisely because we are one family that responsibilities should be made clear. I explained my boundaries one by one. The common household would have a fixed monthly budget. Any excess must be explained. No one could bypass the household office and withdraw silver directly from the accountants. Private debts incurred by individual branches would not be paid from common funds. My dowry and commercial income would not be merged into the Duke's household accounts. Pei Yongju entered through the door just as I finished the last sentence. Old Madame Pei looked at him. Your wife says that if the Duke's residence uses her silver, it must write her a note of debt.
Pai Yongju said besideme.
That is proper. The old madam arched a brow. You certainly take her side. I am not taking a side. Her silver simply does not belong to the Duke's residence. Old Madame Pei had no reply. At last, she said with mock irritation, Very well, we'll try it for 3 months. If you perform poorly, I'll say so. I smiled. Grandmother should say whatever is necessary. During those 3 months, I didn't rush to replace people. Most servants in the Duke's residence weren't lazy. Their duties simply overlapped. 2 purchasing managers bought the same goods from different shops at wildly different prices. The kitchens claimed a fixed quantity of grain each month, whether they consumed it or not, and the waste had grown severe over time. I reassigned responsibilities and made monthly purchasing prices available for inspection. Good work earned rewards. Mistakes required an explanation from the person responsible. After 1 month, the residence's expenses fell by nearly 20%, even though no servant's allowance or reward had been reduced. When old Madame Pei finished examining the accounts, she said for the first time, There's sense in the way you manage things. She didn't transform overnight into a perfectly indulgent elder who agreed with everything I did. She was simply willing to examine the result and admit that her own way might not always be correct. That was enough that the first serious conflict between Pei Yongju and me occurred before autumn. The Angie apothecary planned to transport a shipment of ligusticum and skullcap root from the south. Then news came that mountain bandits had been attacking carts along the road. I negotiated with the transport company to use the waterways instead and prepared to inspect the goods at the docks myself. As I was about to leave, I discovered that every carriage in the Duke's residence had been reassigned. Even my guards had been given other duties that I went directly to Pei Yongju. Did you order them to prevent me from leaving? He didn't deny it. That route has become dangerous. I changed the shipment to the waterways. The docks are disorderly as well. So you decided on my behalf that I would not go, Pei Yongju frowned. I was afraid something would happen to you. If you fear for my safety, you may tell me what you know. You may assign more guards. You may discuss the matter with me. You may not remove the carriages and order everyone to conceal the truth. His expression grew grave. Must you risk yourself for one shipment of herbs? This is not about the herbs. I held his gaze. On the golden invitation, you wrote that marriage would not erase my choices. Now you believe that because you act for my good, you may make decisions in my place. How is that different from my father? The words were harsh. Pei Yongju remained silent for a long time that night. For the first time, we withdrew to separate studies. Neither of us slammed a door in anger. We simply hadn't yet discovered what to say. The next morning, he placed every report concerning the Southern Road, the docks, and the transport company on my desk. Yesterday, I was wrong. He stood beside the table, his tone still somewhat stiff. I am accustomed to eliminating danger first and informing the people around me only after the matter is settled. I did so in the army. I do so at court. I said nothing, he continued. I believed that shielding you was protection. I did not consider that concealing the truth was itself a form of disrespect. And now you decide. I read through the reports. I will not go to the docks today. Have the inspector travel by water and send samples first. Then divide the goods between 2 merchant convoys and bring them into the capital separately. Pei Yongju nodded. I will assign additional guards. Agreed. But show me the list of guards first. Very well. One apology didn't make everything perfect. For a long time afterward, he still instinctively tried to take every danger upon himself. Terrified of losing control again, still tried to carry every burden alone. We argued again, and again, and again. We explained ourselves until the truth was clear. Slowly, we learned that respect was not arranging the safest possible road for another person. It was laying out the truth and allowing her to choose the road herself. Before winter, the Marquis estate put its final restaurant up for sale. The location was excellent, close to the docks, but the menu hadn't changed in years, and the manager was incompetent. The business had continually lost money. In my previous life, I'd converted it into a depot for goods traveling between the north and south. Within 2 years, it became the most profitable property owned by the Marquis of Jingen. This time, no one had done that work. The Marquis estate could only sell to Pei Yongju placed the title deed before me. The price is very low. How low? If the Duke's residence assumes all existing debt, we need pay only 60% of the market value. I read through the accounts. We should buy it. You're not afraid people will say you deliberately came to watch the Marquis estate fall, refusing a sound transaction merely because I once knew the owner would be the true act of spite. When word of the proposed purchase spread, Sir Linchuan came to the Duke's residence in person. I hadn't seen him in months. He remained handsome, but weariness now shadowed his brow. The restaurant may be sold to the Duke's residence, he said, but the Marquis estate must retain 30% of the profits. I opened the ledger he'd brought. The restaurant owes a total of 1,700 taels to the rice merchant, the wine supplier, and various craftsmen. After purchasing it, the Duke's residence must assume every debt and pay for a full renovation. The Marquis estate will contribute no silver and perform no work. On what grounds should it retain 30% of the profit?
Sier Linchuan fra Ned.
The location and name both belong to the Marquis estate. The name has failed to earn a profit for 3 years. In my previous life, after you took control, he stopped abruptly. The room fell utterly silent and I raised my eyes. Sir Linchuan stared at me as realization transformed his expression. You remember too, yes. His fingers tightened sharply. So, on the day of the flower banquet, you deliberately made yourself ill. Yes. You knew there would be an accident beside the lake. I knew only that I had once fallen there. I did not know my sister would certainly fall in my place. The words seemed to wound him. But you did not come. Did you not tell me in our previous life that if you could live again, you would rather never have saved me? His face lost its color. So he remembered that as well. At the time I only resented me for delaying your marriage to my sister. Only believed that everything I did afterward was payment for the crime of falling into the lake. Only waited until I was dying, because you finally had the courage to say what you truly felt. Sir Linchuan said nothing. Did I close the restaurant ledger? I fulfilled your wish, my lord. You waited beside the lake in advance, saved my sister, and married her. What remains to dissatisfy you? I'm not dissatisfied. He answered too quickly to convince even himself. Over the past several months, Xinming Xu had returned to the Shan residence more and more often. She complained that the old madam was difficult to serve and that the Marquis estate lacked money. Sir Linchuan couldn't understand why she failed at tasks I'd managed in our previous life. Neither of them was unforgivably wicked. They were simply two people accustomed to being cared for. Once they came together, one of them would have to learn how to carry responsibility first. The purchase terms will not change, I said, pushing the contract back to him. The Duke's residence will pay the agreed price and assume every existing debt. The Marquis estate will retain neither management rights nor future profit. Sir Linchuan looked at me. And if I refuse, then find another buyer. He sat for a long time before asking, in our previous life, did you restore all the Marquis estate's businesses one by one? Do you not already know the answer? I thought you merely knew how to manage a household. The dowry I brought into the Marquis estate totaled 63,000 taels. His head snapped up. How could it have been so much? 2 shops, 1 farming estate, jewelry, and silver. My voice remained calm. The first time I contributed money, I asked the accounting office to send a note of debt to your study. You said, husband and wife should not calculate so precisely, and you ordered the note torn apart. He clearly remembered. That note had been the final time in my previous life that I tried to preserve proof of what belonged to me. Sir Linchuan didn't even read it before ordering a servant to destroy it. After that, everything I invested became something the Marquis estate was assumed to have always possessed. My lord, in my previous life, I poured my dowry and my entire life into those empty accounts. In this life, when we discuss business alone. At last, he lifted the brush and signed the contract. Before leaving, he stopped at the doorway. Do you hate me? I did in my previous life. And now, I looked through the window. The osmanthus tree in the courtyard had begun to flower. The day before, Pei Yongju had ordered a stone table placed beneath it, so I could rest there when the accounts made me tired. Now I have no time, I said. The commercial houses are busy, and the Duke's residence has many affairs. You are no longer worth the time it would take to hate you. The last trace of light faded slowly from his eyes. Once the restaurant formally became part of the Duke's holdings, I converted it into a freight depot. When the first shipment of southern medicinal herbs reached the capital, Pei Yongju accompanied me to inspect it. He didn't ask what Sir Linchuan and I had discussed. On the way back, he merely said, "How do you feel today?" Calmer than I expected. Good. I turned my head toward him. Your Grace doesn't mind. Mind what? He and I were husband and wife for an entire lifetime. Pei Yongju's step paused. In this life, you married me. Is that all? What else should there be? I deliberately said. I thought your Grace might be jealous. His expression remained composed, though the skin behind his ears appeared faintly red. If my wife has leisure to speculate about such things, she should use it to inspect the goods. He quickened his pace. I stood where I was and laughed for a moment before following. After winter arrived, I fell ill. At first it was only a cold. Unwilling to delay Four Seasons Workshop's year-end deliveries, I continued visiting the commercial houses every day. Pei Yongju advised me to rest twice. On the third day, he placed reports about the snowstorm on the southern road and the physician's instructions in front of me. My wife made a side for herself. I looked at him. He clearly remembered the lesson of removing the carriages without consulting me. My recommendation, he continued, is that you remain in the residence. The ledgers can be brought here, and Manager Du is capable of handling the shop. My throat ached from coughing, but I still refused to yield easily. And if I insist on going, I will accompany you. Does your grace have no official business today? I can request leave. I glared at him for a long moment, then threw my cloak back onto the couch. I'll stay. He brought me a bowl of medicine. Drink. I smelled it and frowned. It's too bitter. There are sugar cakes. It will still taste bitter after I finish. He was silent for a moment. Then he poured half the medicine into another bowl and swallowed it in one draught. The bitterness made his brow tighten, but he forced himself not to speak. I couldn't help laughing. You're not ill. Why drink my medicine? Will you drink it now? I had no choice but to finish the remaining half. That night, the fever rose and fell repeatedly. I dreamed of the final winter of my previous life. The Marquis estate lacked charcoal. Seer Linchuan hadn't returned for several days. Qingdai held my hand again and again, weeping as she begged me to wake. In the dream, I heard her voice once more. My lady, do not sleep. I reached out and caught the sleeve of the person beside me. He didn't pull away. A warm palm closed steadily around my hand. When I woke the next morning, Pei Yongju sat beside the bed. Faint shadows beneath his eyes. Your grace didn't attend court. I requested leave. It is only a cold. There was no need. You kept saying you were cold last night. Since our wedding, I'd never told him about the 8 years of my previous marriage. He knew Seer Linchuan and I had been husband and wife in another life, but he didn't know how those years had hollowed me out little by little. Perhaps because he'd never demanded the story. I finally found the courage to speak. I died at 26 in my previous life. His fingers went stilled slowly. I told him how I'd married into the Marquis estate, how I'd poured my dowry into its debts, how I'd spent day after day waiting for a man who would never turn toward me. Once spoken aloud, the events sounded almost ordinary. But enough ordinary pain repeated day after day could consume an entire life. So when I accepted your proposal in this life, it wasn't only because I cared for you. I looked at him. The contract gave me a way out. Pei Yongju didn't become angry. I know. It's not that I don't understand affection. I'm simply afraid that kindness given today may be taken back tomorrow. He remained silent for a long time. Then you need not believe in it now. When should I believe? Every day that follows. He didn't ask me to surrender myself to him. He didn't demand that one promise prove my trust. He was willing to place the answer inside the days we had yet to live. After recovering, I returned to the commercial houses. Life appeared unchanged. Yet certain things slowly shifted. I began waiting for him at the evening meal. Before leaving each morning, he told me whether he expected to return for dinner. He no longer slept in the outer chamber. The first time we shared a bed, I was so tense I barely slept. When he noticed, he only held my hand. If you're uncomfortable, I can leave the bed. I didn't release him. There's no need. Snow fell beyond the window. His palm was warm. His breathing evened at last. I understood that drawing close to another person didn't have to mean losing myself. As spring approached, Pei Yongju took out the contract we'd signed before our marriage. I looked at him. Your Grace wishes to divorce already. For the first time, a crack appeared in his usually composed expression. When did I say I wish to divorce? Then why bring out the contract? He hesitated. Can the 3-year condition be changed? Did you not propose that after 3 years I could leave whenever I wished? I did. And now you regret it? Yes. He admitted it so readily that I was the one left speechless. Pei Yongju looked at me. Shanzai, I do not wish to wait 3 years before asking whether you intend to stay. I picked up the contract and walked to the desk. He remained where he was and didn't approach. Have you decided? He asked. Not entirely. I took up the brush, crossed out the words after 3 years, and added a new line beside them. At any time, either party may request an amicable divorce. Dowry, property, earnings, and personal choice shall not be altered by affection or its absence. Pei Yongju read the words. Something stirred deep in his eyes. You will not burn the remaining conditions, no. I placed the brush down. My willingness to stay and my right to remain myself have never been opposing things. After a moment, he picked up the brush as well and signed his name beside mine. Then, are you willing to stay? I raised my eyes. Pei Yongju. It was the first time I'd called him by name. His gaze trembled almost imperceptibly. I am willing. His hand rose slowly, then stopped before touching me. I took it myself and placed it in my waist. The contract still exists. You're not permitted to change your mind either. I will not. Words alone are not proof. What proof does my wife desire? Before I could answer, he bent and kissed me. The kiss was gentle, carrying the tenderness of something cherished after long restraint. The contract was not burned. It returned to its wooden box. 2 copies kept separately by 2 people. Love was not the destruction of every retreat. Love was choosing again and again to walk toward each other while the roadway remained open. And not long after Pei Yongju and I revised our contract, trouble struck the Shan family. Father had invested in a merchant fleet traveling from the south. When the river route closed, the goods were stranded and tens of thousands of taels could not be recovered in time. The Shan family's common accounts immediately ran short. Madame Zhu first asked the Marquis estate for help, but the Marquis of Jing'an hadn't yet repaid its own debts. How could it produce spare silver? So they turned their attention to me. Father came to the Duke's residence in person and opened the conversation by demanding half the profits of the Cloud Briade shop. You're a married daughter. Having too many properties in your own name invites gossip. Giving half to your birth family would also count as filial respect. I stared at him, almost believing I'd heard incorrectly. Does Father understand that the Cloud Briade shop doesn't belong entirely to me? The Duke of Jangua values you so highly. Can you not even make a decision about one shop? No. His voice hardened. The Shan family raised you for 18 years, fed you and clothed you, and found you this marriage. Now the family faces hardship, and you respond with such coldness. In my previous life, whenever the Shan family wanted something from me, Father mentioned the debt of raising me. They had indeed kept me from starving. They hadn't abandoned me to the streets. But the annual income from my birth mother's properties had far exceeded the cost of my life in the Shan household. The money used to raise me had always come from my mother. I will return to the Shan residence in 3 days, I said. Father assumed I'd agreed. His expression softened. It is good that you have come to your senses. 3 days later, I returned with Qing Dai, an accountant, and my mother's dowry register. Pei Yongju came with me. The moment Father saw the Duke in person, unease crossed his face. This is merely a private family matter. There was no need for your grace to. I am accompanying my wife on a visit to her family. Pei Yongju said nothing more and took the seat beside me. He didn't speak in my place. He didn't use his rank to crush anyone. His presence simply made one thing clear. No one would be able to confine me inside the Shan residence today. I placed the account books on the table one after another. My birth mother's original dowry consisted of 2 shops, 300 mu of farmland, and 10,000 taels in silver. Madame Zhu's expression changed. Why bring up accounts from so many years ago? Father said the Shan family supported me for 18 years. Naturally, I came to settle the matter clearly. The accountant began reading the yearly profits aloud. After my mother died, the Shan family managed her shops and farmland for 18 years. After taxes and maintenance, the total profit exceeded 50,000 taels. Less than 8,000 had actually been spent on me. I will not demand repayment of the remainder. I pushed a new contract toward Father. Beginning this year, I will pay Father 500 taels in support every year for the rest of his life. Beyond that, the Shan family's losses, my brother's marriages, and the cost of their official careers will have nothing to do with me. Father's face turned iron gray. Are you severing ties with the Shan family? No. I am defining the responsibility clearly. Madame Ju cried sharply. How can members of one family calculate matters so precisely? I'd heard those words too many times, every time someone wanted to take something from my hands. If Mother truly believed a family should never calculate clearly, she would not have asked for the Cloud Briade shop's profits today. Father refused to sign. Only then did Pei Yongju speak. Lord Shaw need not sign if he is unwilling. Father looked up startled. Your Grace is willing to. The Duke's residence will invite the clan elders and the local authorities to audit the income from the late Madame Shan's dowry together, Pei Yongju said evenly. Whatever must be returned will be handled according to law. Father's face changed at once. If the matter were truly investigated, the Shan family would be required to surrender far more than 50,000 taels. In the end, he pressed his seal onto the contract. As I put it away, I didn't feel the fierce excitement I'd imagined. I felt light. From that day forward, I no longer owed the Shan family an endless debt of gratitude that could never be calculated and never be repaid. Before I left, Xinming Xu followed me into the courtyard. She was thinner than before her marriage. The pampered brightness had faded from her face, replaced by exhaustion. Sister, have you been waiting all this time to watch me become a joke? No. Then why, everything's gone wrong since I entered the Marquis estate. You knew what awaited me. I knew the estate had financial holes. I didn't know how you would choose to live there. Her eyes reddened. Were you even more miserable than I am in our previous life? It was the first time she'd asked about me of her own accord. After a moment, I said, whether I suffered more or less no longer matters. Lin Chuan speaks of you often now. I frowned. She gave a bitter smile. He doesn't wish to restore what you had. He's simply realized that the peaceful life he once possessed didn't appear by itself. A cold wind crossed the courtyard. Xinming Xu pulled her cloak more tightly around her. I always believed that marrying the man I loved would make me happy. But he expects me to manage the Marquis estate as you did, while I expect him to keep coaxing and pleasing me as he did before the wedding. We quarrel every day. I blame him for hiding the estate's debts before our marriage. He blames me for failing to share his burdens. She looked at me. Sister, what should I do in my previous life? Hearing that question would have made me immediately begin solving her problems. I'd been too accustomed to repairing other people's lives. Now I only said, if you wish to leave, first decide how you will support yourself afterward. If you wish to stay, then learn to carry the responsibilities of the Marchioness of Jing'an. What about Lin Chuan? His responsibilities belong to him. I looked directly at her. Neither of you can wait for the other person to become exactly what you desire first. She was silent for a long time. You will not help me, no. My answer was direct. Sister, this is the life you chose. Hurt crossed her face, but so did the first glimmer of something more awake. I didn't comfort her. Some forms of growth can be completed only by the person living through them. In the carriage back to the Duke's residence, Pei Yongju asked, does your heart hurt a little? Because she's my sister, because I once wanted very badly to receive one moment of genuine concern from her. He took my hand.
And now?
Now I no longer wait for it. Outside the carriage window, the Shan residence grew smaller and smaller. Freedom didn't mean never looking back. It meant that even if I turned my head, nothing behind me could drag me back again. 3 years later, Four Seasons Workshop had grown into Four Seasons Commercial House. At the beginning, it employed only a little more than 20 soldiers, widows, and dependents. Now it operated 8 workshops across the capital and the surrounding prefectures. The business no longer sold only embroidery and clothing. It also produced medicinal packets, dried travel rations, and practical goods that could be carried easily. Women could earn money by the piece, study bookkeeping, or train for management. Some became embroiderers. Some became supervisors. Others saved enough silver to leave and open small shops of their own. Merchants who met me addressed me as proprietor. The people of the Duke's residence still called me Madam. Pei Yongju sometimes deliberately called me Proprietor Shan at the entrance of the commercial house, making the managers lower their heads to hide their smiles. And when he returned too late, I ordered the kitchens to leave only plain congee and simple vegetables, reminding His Grace that a noble title didn't excuse him from caring for his health. We didn't become one of those legendary couples who never quarreled. He still instinctively drew danger toward himself. When I became absorbed in work, I still forgot to eat. We sometimes spoke with cold faces. We sometimes withdrew to separate studies. But every time, one of us eventually knocked on the other's door. Not because someone had lost, but because neither of us wished to let a misunderstanding survive the night merely to win a moment's pride. The Sean family recovered from its financial trouble. Father no longer demanded money from me. During festivals, he accepted only the fixed support payment. He never truly believed he'd done anything wrong. I no longer tried to force him to understand. Some people's approval wasn't worth spending a lifetime to obtain. Shinming Xu remained the Marchioness of Jing'an. In the second year of her marriage, she truly assumed management of the inner household. She sold several expensive sets of jewelry, repaid part of the debt, and canceled unnecessary banquets. At first, Sir Linchuan couldn't adjust, and they continued to quarrel often. But one day, she ordered 20 sets of inexpensive, durable winter clothing from Four Seasons commercial house for the servants of the Marquis estate. That was when I knew she'd finally begun to see how other people lived. Sir Linchuan also stopped caring only about appearances outside the household. He went to the family farms to inspect the accounts himself and learned to calculate the monthly expenses. Their marriage didn't become a poem, but at last it began to resemble a real life. That spring, I attended another flower banquet at the Grand Princess's residence. The same lake lay beneath the blossoms. Apricot petals drifted across the water, just as they had 3 years before. After the guests departed, Sir Linchuan called to me beside the lake. He appeared steadier than he'd once been. Shanzai, I have always owed you an apology. I stopped. In our previous life, I blamed every unhappiness upon you, he said, looking over the water. I believed that failing to marry Mingxu was the source of our unhappy marriage. Only after marrying her in this life did I understand that the true problem had always been me. I demanded that my wife understand me, yet never considered understanding her. Everything you did for the Marquis estate, I treated as something naturally owed. He turned, folded his hands, and bowed to me with solemn respect. I am sorry. Before my death in our previous life, I'd imagined his regret countless times. Now the day had truly arrived, and I felt only peace. I accept your apology. Bitterness entered his eyes. But you will not forgive me. That's not what I mean. I smiled slightly. Whether I forgive you or not no longer decides the direction of my life. He was silent for a long time, then smiled as well. Does Pei Yongju treat you well? Very well. Then that is enough. This time there was no resentment and no attempt to keep me. We turned away from each other beside the lake. The 8 years we'd spent as husband and wife in another lifetime finally ended in that moment. By the time I returned to the Duke's residence, night had fallen. Qingdai waited at the gate with a strange expression. Madam, His Grace ordered you to return to your room immediately. What happened? She suppressed a smile and handed me a golden invitation. The familiar red gold design gleamed beneath my fingers. This was the 3rd golden invitation Pei Yongju had sent me. I opened it. His handwriting filled the page. The Duchess of Jianghua is requested to return to her room for dinner tonight. Business is forbidden. Ledgers are forbidden. Proprietor Sean is forbidden from neglecting her husband merely because she is busy. At the bottom, he'd added a smaller line. If my wife still refuses to return, Pei will personally visit the commercial house and request her presence. I burst out laughing. When I entered our room, Pei Yongju was already seated at the table. Several simple household dishes had been arranged before him. In the center sat a plate of osmanthus sugar cakes. Your Grace now requires a golden invitation merely to ask your wife to eat with you. An ordinary message cannot move Proprietor Sean. I sat opposite him. The first invitation sought talent. The second proposed marriage. What is the third request? He placed a sugar cake in my bowl. That my wife accompany me for a few more meals. Only meals, there may be other possibilities. I raised a brow, such as Pei Yongju leaned slightly closer. My wife has left early and returned late for 7 days. I have been neglected. What compensation does your Grace desire? He looked at me, the faintest smile in his eyes. The rest of your life. He spoke the words calmly, yet they carried more weight than any extravagant vow. I picked up the osmanthus cake and broke it in half. I kept one piece and placed the other in his bowl. Too sweet, he said, frowning just as he had 3 years earlier. You've eaten them for 3 years. Are you still not accustomed to the taste? No. Then why do you eat one every time? Pei Yongju lifted the half cake. Because my wife gave it to me. Naturally, I must eat it. I lowered my head, smiling that in my previous life, falling into the lake had taught me that my life could only be chosen by others. Sir Lin Chuan jumped into the water and saved me, so I had to marry him. The Shan family raised me, so I had to sacrifice myself for them. The Marquis estate gave me a place, so I had to exhaust everything I possessed to preserve it. After returning to the past, I avoided the lake and waited for no one to save me. I accepted the first golden invitation and proved my ability. I accepted the second, after building my own road of retreat, choosing marriage with my own hand. The third golden invitation was nothing more than one person waiting for me to come home. Once, I believed Pei Yongju would be the person who saved me from my previous life. Only later did I understand the person who truly saved me was the woman who woke after rebirth, poured freezing water over her own head, closed her doors against the banquet, and dared to refuse everything others called natural and proper. Pei Yongju didn't offer me another form of dependence. He offered a lifetime walking beside me after I'd learned to stand on my own. Outside the window, the spring wind swept through the courtyard, scattering apricot blossoms across the ground. I folded the third golden invitation carefully and placed it inside my dressing box. In its deepest compartment, the white jade hairpin still rested in silence. 3 years earlier, I'd refused to wear it to the banquet that was meant to decide my fate. 3 years later, I was no longer afraid to look at it. Some things remain not because we wish to remember the pain, but to remind us of who we became. Fate once pushed me toward the edge of the lake. At last, I'd learned to turn away. Bonus Chapter 1. The Duke was not jealous. Pei Yongju sent me his fourth golden invitation on an otherwise ordinary afternoon. I was discussing the opening of a new shop with several managers when Qing Dai entered carrying the letter. It contained only one question. With whom did my wife share the midday meal at Drunken Immortal Restaurant yesterday? I considered it. Besides Manager Chen and Supervisor Sun, the new accountant, Zhu Heng, had also been present. Zhu Heng was young, remarkably quick with numbers, and possessed such refined features that many people had mistaken him for the sheltered son of a noble household when he first joined the commercial house. I picked up a brush and replied, with 3 managers. Less than half an hour later, the invitation returned. A second line had appeared beneath mine. Was one of them surnamed Zhu? I stared at the words, then finally laughed. That evening, Pei Yongju came to the commercial house in person. His expression was perfectly normal when he asked Zhu Heng, I hear, Mr. Zhu, you have not yet married.
Zhu froze.
That is correct, Your Grace. Is there someone you favor? Zhu's ears turned red at once, and his eyes slipped secretly toward Qing Dai. Only then did I understand. In the carriage home, I deliberately asked, Did Your Grace come in person today because you were jealous? No. The answer came far too quickly. Then why ask about Mr. Zhu's marriage? I was showing concern for a subordinate. He is my subordinate. Husband and wife are one household. I held back my laughter and asked, Then, did Your Grace determine whom he likes? Pei Yongju was silent for a moment.
Qing Dai.
So you noticed long ago. That night, I wrote another golden invitation and pushed it across the table to him. His Grace was not jealous today, yet questioned a subordinate's marriage without cause. As punishment, he must accompany his wife at dinner for 7 consecutive days, without absence. He studied it, then lifted his private seal, and stamped the bottom. I agreed only to accompany my wife at dinner. Very well. I placed the invitation in my dressing box. Then this shall count as the 4th golden invitation. He looked at me helplessly, but didn't stop me. The Duke of Jiangua truly had not been jealous. It was merely that afterward, whenever Zhu Heng reported the accounts to me alone, Qing Dai was always coincidentally summoned to bring tea. Bonus Chapter 2. My sister spent 7 days clearing the storeroom. The first time Shinming Shu came to Four Seasons Commercial House to learn business, she wore a brocade skirt worth 80 taels. Standing at the storeroom entrance, she frowned. Why is there so much dust here? Storerooms hold stock. Naturally, they are not as clean as a young lady's bedchamber. She made her maid wipe the hem of her skirt for a long time before asking, I came only to examine the accounts. Why must I enter the storeroom? How can you understand an account without seeing the goods? The Marquis estate still owned an incense shop that earned only a few hundred taels a year. After hearing that one of my shops could earn several thousand, she decided business management consisted of reading a few ledgers. I handed her the incense shop's inventory book. Begin by clearing and counting the entire storeroom. She stared at me in disbelief. All of it, 176 varieties of incense and more than 2,300 individual items. Her face immediately paled. How long will it take? 7 days. If you work carefully. 7 days later, she truly returned with a new inventory book. More than 30 jin of incense had grown damp. Over a dozen varieties had been purchased at excessively high prices. 2 chests of agarwood marked as sold out in the accounts were still stacked in a corner. She slapped the inventory book onto my desk, her eyes shining. Sister, I found the problem. I turned 2 pages. Not bad. Then will the incense shop soon earn several thousand taels? No. Her smile froze. Why not? Finding the problem is only the first step. Next, you must dispose of the damp stock, renegotiate the purchase prices, adjust the incense formulas, attract customers, and control future waste. With every item I named, her face grew paler. At last, she hugged the inventory book to her chest and remained silent for a long time. Did you learn everything this way, one step at a time? In our previous life, no one taught me. I had to discover it for myself. She lowered her head. Did I always believe these things were easy for you? Yes. Then why did you never scold me? I smiled. It is not too late to begin now. She glared at me, then unexpectedly laughed as well. Half a year later, the incense shop's profit had doubled. It was nowhere near the amount she'd first imagined. But at a family banquet, she was still so delighted that she drank 2 cups more than usual. After the guests left, she held my hand and said quietly, Sister, only now do I understand how tired you must have been in our previous life. I looked at her for a moment. It is enough that you understand.